the next darshana or tradition that we will try and get acquainted with is Vaiśeṣika. It is generally paired with Nyaya. It is traditionally attributed to one Kanada Rishi, along with Panini, whom you may have heard in some other context like Vyakarana. Kanada is another very important Rishi. These two are supposed to have given the methods for all other Shastras. The Vaiśeṣika Sutras are supposed to have been authored by Kanada. In 5th century, there was another scholar by the name Prashastapada who has given the commentary on these sutras. Later on, towards the end of the first millennia, it merged along with Nyaya, and today what we have is a syncretic combined school called Nyaya Vaiśeṣika. The Vaiśeṣika, the term, if you see, it derives itself from the another Sanskrit word called Vishesha, which means difference or unique attribute of a particular thing. So there are multiple entities in this world. So this stand or this camera or this laptop, etc. Each of these things is different from each other. If you take two stands also, or if you take two laptops, let us say of the same company, even then you will see some distinction between them. So they tried to recognize this diversity, but at the same time they tried to classify it as easily as possible, and that is the reason why they get the word Vishesha. They tried to find out, or they noticed an important feature or an important entity called Vishesha, which is peculiar to each entity, because of which it is different from another entity. They believed that diversity is fundamental to all aspects of the world, or diversity is the fundamental aspect of the world. You take other traditions like Vedanta or especially Advaita Vedanta, they will say that the whole world is just one, it is Brahman. Whereas if you remember, both the Nyaya as well as the Vaiśeṣika believed that whatever we get from uncontradicted experience should be true or should be real. And all of us, from our day-to-day experience, we know that there are multiple entities in the world. So there are diverse entities. We don't see one entity everywhere. Some maybe sages, etc. may see it, but all the rest of us see different entities. So for us, diversity is the given experience, or it is the day-to-day experience. So the Vaiśeṣika also tried to take this common experience and tried to give a theory for that. However, as a theoretician, it is very difficult for us to give a explanation for each and every entity. If I have to give one explanation for this stand, one explanation for the mind, one explanation for the sky, another explanation for this chair, etc., there will be a whole lot of theories which I have to explain, or a whole lot of theories, infinite objects in fact, which I will have to explain. So the easier way out for a theoretician is to classify these various entities into certain categories. So what you have to do is that you have to just explain that category. What is the nature of that category? If I explain the nature of the category, I would have explained the nature of every other thing that is there inside that category. So they tried to develop a set of categories under which you can subsume all the entities in the world, whether it be a stand or a laptop or a mind or a cognition or whatever it is. I can put it in certain number of baskets. If I give you the general definition of the basket, all the entities within that basket would have been explained. This was the strategy that they took, and according to them, a knowledge of these categories was important to get liberation. They tried to classify all the entities that we have in the world into 7 categories. 6 of these things are existent categories or bhava padarthas, and one is a abhava padartha or a non-existent or a let us say absence category. We will come to that later, but the 6 categories of existence or bhava padarthas are dravya, guna, karma, samanya, vishesha, samavaya. So these are the 6 categories of existence. So all the entities that you take in this world, they can be put into any one of these 6 categories. To this we add one more category called abhava or absence. With these 7 categories, I can describe almost any phenomenon that happens in this world. Let us take a brief example and see how this happens. Take a simple sentence, okay, like no brown cow walks here. So this is the sentence that I have. Just to repeat, no brown cow walks here. So now in this sentence there are different words. Each of these words belongs to a different category. For example, the word cow belongs to a category called dravya or substance. Here, which is a spatial term, it here represents some spatial location, isn't it? So according to the Vaiśeṣika, even space is a substance because it can have certain things inside it. So the word cow and here fall under the category called substance. So if you take them individually, cow is a different entity, whereas space is a different entity. Now what the Vaiśeṣika have done is that they have clubbed both of them into a single category called substance or dravya. So these two stand for a category called dravya. Then there is the word called brown. It is coming under the category called guna or attribute. Now all of these attributes, which are brown, red, hard, soft, contact, etc., all of these things can be put under the category called guna. So instead of giving a theory of each and every color, what is the theory for brown color, what is the theory for red color, what is the theory for softness, what is the theory for hardness, etc., I can just give one theory for guna or attribute. So whatever is true of that basket will be true of everything that is there inside that basket. So the word brown, which is a color term, falls under the category called guna. Then there is one word called walks. This is an action. So they have created a separate category for action called karma. So any kind of activity, walking, running, jumping, etc., all of these activities fall under the ontological category called karma. So I don't have to give a theory of each and every action. If I just have one category called action, I would have given an account of all of them. Then how are you able to recognize that so and so is a cow, or so and so is brown, or this is a stand, this is a human being? How are you able to recognize this? This is the first time I am seeing this stand. I have never seen this stand before in my life, and yet I have been able to recognize that this is a stand. Why? It is because it shares some common feature which is common to all the stands. Similarly, the word cow, this cow for example, I am seeing for the first time in my life, yet I am able to recognize that this is a cow. How is that possible? Because it has certain attributes, or it has something in it because of which I am able to label it, this is a cow. I may have seen the human being for the first time in my life, but I am still able to say that person is or that thing is a human being. How am I able to do that? Because they have something called the samanya or the universal, which all of them have. So this has the stand samanya, the cow has the cow samanya or the gotva that they have. The human have the universal hood called humanness, the human universal called humanness. So they have all of these things, because of which we are able to recognize or identify that each of them falls under this category. Apart from this, they have difference. So I am able to point out that this is a human being, but this human being is different from this human being. This stand is different from this stand. This laptop is different from this laptop. I am able to say this also. So the particularity also is a distinguished feature of reality. So if you are able to follow, the commonness is one kind of category, the particularity is another kind of category. Now all of these are held together by one glue, one ontological or metaphysical glue called samavaya. So the guna inheres inside the substance. So the technical term for this relation, inherence relation, is samavaya. The color of an entity, and for example this remote, let us say it is black in color. I cannot separate out the black of this just like I have separated the remote out of my hand. So these two are in a very simple relationship, the contact of this remote and my hand. It is a very simple kind of a contact, I can separate it out, whereas the color of this thing and the entity are in a very different kind of a relationship. Similarly, if I am sitting and talking over here, this action that I am doing is very inherently related to me, and it is not the same relation that I have with this chair. I can get up from this chair and walk. I can't do that now, but I can get up from this chair and I can walk, but the action that I am doing inheres in me. So the technical term for this inherence relation is samavaya. Now notice that there is one word still that we have not yet explained, which is no. So what was the sentence? Original sentence, no brown cow walks over here. So we have to explain that negation also, we have to explain that absence also. So they created one ontological category for that also called abhava or absence. So as you can see, using one simple sentence, you are able to see how the 7 padarthas that the Vaiśeṣikas have proposed, all of them are able to, you are able to find them in a single sentence. Incidentally, that is what the term padartha also means, pada artha. So that towards which a word reaches. So the entity pointed out by a pada is called the padartha. So the cow, the pada called cow, reaches out to a padartha called the substance or the dravya cow. Similarly, the term here points out to a spatial location, which is also a dravya. The pada brown points out to some color entity. So like this, each of the linguistic entity corresponds to some existence or some entity outside in the reality. So this is how the 7 categories you can use in order to break the sentence into its individual ontological components. Now, another important contribution of the Vaiśeṣika are the theory of the Paramanu. If you remember, the Naiyayikas also accept this Paramanu, but the real proponents of this theory were the Vaiśeṣika. So, the Nyaya borrowed lot of concepts from Vaiśeṣika, and the Vaiśeṣika borrowed lot of concepts from the Nyaya. So, for example, the idea of Ishvara, etc., whatever the Naiyayikas believe, the Vaiśeṣika also believes. Similarly, the idea that Paramanu that the Vaiśeṣika developed was also acceptable to the Naiyayikas. So, this Paramanu, out of which the world is created, if you remember, these are the smallest particles. They are not further divisible, and each Paramanu is distinct from other. So, you remember there was one ontological category called Vaiśeṣa. Each of the Paramanu has a Vaiśeṣa, because of which it is different from every other Paramanu. It is because of this Vaiśeṣa that the notion of Paramanu here is different from the modern notion of atom. So, you may have some of you may have been acquainted with this modern notion of atom. One gold atom, if you take, it is same as another gold atom. Whereas in the case of Paramanu, it is not like that. Each atom is different from each other. The atoms of Prithvi or Earth are different from the atoms of Vayu or the atoms of Jala, etc. And within Prithvi also, each Prithvi Paramanu is different from another Prithvi Paramanu. So, in this way, it differs from the modern conception of atom. Though it is translated, Paramanu is translated as atom, you must remember that this important distinction is there between the Vaiśeṣika idea of Paramanu and the modern idea of atom. And this Paramanu form the material cause of the world. The Paramanus of Prithvi, Jala, that Prithvi is earth, Jala water, fire Agni, and Vayu wind. So, the Paramanus of these form the material cause of this world. And another important thing is that we cannot directly perceive the Paramanu. So, today with some electron microscope or something like that, we can see some atoms or something like that. It is possible perhaps, but the presence of the Paramanu is not known via direct perception or even aided perception. It is known via inference. So, the argument that the Vaiśeṣika gives is that all the entities that we see in this world are composite entities. Composite means it is made up of parts. Now, logically speaking, you should be able to break away that components into smaller components. So, the stand, for example, the lower part is different from the upper part. There is a screw over here I can remove. So, the upper part will come away from the below part. There is another screw down from the middle part to the bottom part. There is another screw. I can see one nut over there. I can remove that and one rod will come away from another rod. In this way, I can go on separating out the parts of the composite entity that is there in the external world. If you follow this step logically, you should end up with some entity which is partless, which cannot be divided further. That entity is called Paramanu. So, via inference or by a logical reasoning, they posited this entity called Paramanu and not by direct perception. So, this was the general, a brief, very brief introduction to their theory of Paramanu. The Vaiśeṣika were not the only people to come up with a theory of Paramanu. The Jaina also had their own theory of Paramanu. The Bauddha Darshana also had their own theory of Paramanu. But in this short lecture series, we have seen only the Vaiśeṣika idea of Paramanu. Apart from this, the other ideas like liberation, etc., are the same as that what the Nyaya school believed in. So, these people also believe that the correct understanding of the Pramana and the Prameya will lead us to liberation, and that the Ishvara has the same roles that the Nyaya proposed is acceptable to the Vaiśeṣika also.